G'day guys, Dean from Blog for the Blood God here, and today I want to give you my top 8 picks for best demonic allied detachment for your Chaos Space Marine lists. So we're going to talk about some different synergies between legions and demonica, alignments. We're going to talk about some different synergies between specific units, and we're also going to talk about some overall themes on how this is all going to play in to create a cohesive and powerful demonic CSM force. So with that being said, we're going to jump straight into the video, but before we do, I just wanted to quickly raise your attention to a new feature that YouTube has brought out called the Super Thanks. And basically what this feature does is it allows you to give one-off donations to support the channel by putting a comment in and putting an attached donation to it. So if you can't be fucked going onto Patreon and signing up and showing your support there, and you don't want to support via the neoprene objective markers, which are another way that you can show support for this channel, if you don't want to do either of those things, but you do still want to show some support, then a super thanks is a really good way to do it, where you can just throw us $5, throw us $1, throw us $10, whatever you're comfortable with. And that way it sort of contributes in a non-ongoing basis. So Patreon's really good if you want to join and get that ongoing coaching and the ongoing list advice and the ongoing mentorship. That sort of stuff is really good through Patreon. If you want a one-off where you're going to receive something in return, purchasing the neoprene objective markers is a really good way to go. But if you want to just throw that one-off piece of support for the channel, then a super thanks is the best way to do it. So that being said, let's just jump straight into the video.
Blog for the Blood God.
Alrighty guys, so before we get into this, we should just do a real quick recap on the way that adding demons to a CSM list works. I did a detailed breakdown video, which you can see in the links below if you want to go back and look at that, where I break down all the very specific things. But basically, the thing that's worth noting here is that you can only have 25% of your total power level as Chaos Daemons, and they have to be in their own detachment. That's the way you add them in, because they get agents of chaos and blah, blah, blah. So I have to make a few assumptions here, because basically that 25% of your power level is going to vary from list to list. However, most 2,000 point tournament level lists have 100 power level. That's the more or less the standard. And this will vary depending on the way that you upgrade your units and those sorts of things, but in general, you're going to have about 100 points. So what I've done is I've said that when I'm designing these detachments, I've capped myself at 25 power level. So there are a few ways that you could have increased the power level spent on your CSM without spending too many extra points, which would then increase the amount of power level that you could spend on demonic allies. So it's worth noting that before we start. And also, I've included the points cost and the CP costs in here as well. So let's just jump straight into the first Chaos God and let's have a look at KHORNE. Alrighty, first up we have a KHORNE detachment called the Unstoppable Force. Costs 24 power level, 480 points, and it'll cost you 4 command points to run this detachment. You have a Bloodthirster with the Indomitable Onslaught, which gives him an 8 wound per phase cap. He has the Devastating Blow, which allows him to ignore Feel No Pain and other people's phase caps. And he has Angrath, King of Blades, for +1 damage and ignore hit, wound, and damage modifiers. Then you round that patrol detachment out with 10 bloodletters. Alright, so the reason that you would want to take this detachment is it's a very strong counter into the new meta that we're emerging into, which has a lot of phase capped characters. You've got Cthans, you've got Bloodthirsters, you've got Abaddon, you've got Phoenix Lords, you've got Ghazghkull, and there's plenty more coming, I have a strong suspicion. So I think having a unit in your army that can just go in and go, cool, I ignore your phase caps, I ignore your Feel No Pains, I ignore your hit wound modifiers, and I do massive amounts of damage. Like, yes, it's a 4 CP investment, but to be able to do that is so immensely powerful. And another thing worth noting is if you take a Warp Locus Master of Possessions and don't give him a Chaos Mark, you can then deep strike the KHORNE units within 6 inches of him and outside of 6 inches of your opponent. Which means that if you tee it up correctly on the table, you're going to be able to get a 6-inch charge with this Bloodthirster from Deep Strike. Or, alternatively, you can just deploy him on the table because he's toughness 8, he has a 4-up demon save against melee and shooting, and he has a phase cap of 8 wounds. So he's really, really hard to put down, and he does immense damage to your opponent. especially against things that are phase capped that you might normally struggle to deal with. He just goes and he goes, no, it's no problem, mate. I got this. Hold my beer. Like, very powerful, big, strong unit. However, this detachment is going to be a 480 point commitment, and it is going to cost you 4 of your command points, which means you only have 2 left to spend on your CSM. So it's a big investment, but I think it's a very powerful combo. Next up, we have one I call Release the Hounds. So this one costs 22 power level, 430 points, and 2 command points. And basically this has gone for the Skull Taker. He's really powerful because he has a 3 damage weapon that ignores invulnerable saves and doesn't require any command points to get. Then you have 10 Bloodletters for your troops, and you have 2 units of 5 Flesh Hounds, which gives you the Deny the Witch, and it also gives you access to a 3+ Deny the Witch stratagem. So this is really powerful because a lot of armies rely on psychic secondaries like Psychic Interrogation or Warp Ritual, and having the ability to just deny that on a 3-up is so powerful. And on top of that, you also have a character in there that has a 3 damage weapon that ignores invulnerable saves. This is really good into so many armies because he just goes in and slashes them to pieces. So he's really powerful, and the Flesh Hounds, being fast, being relatively tough, having somewhat decent damage, but mainly giving you 2 additional sources of Deny the Witch and the ability to deny on a 3+ if you're within a certain range. Very, very powerful into a psychic heavy meta. And we're seeing a lot of psychic powers being really clutch as well. Not only the ones that are going to score your opponent victory points, but also, you know, things like an advance and charge on a Tyrannid monster. Well, if they move up planning to charge you because they advance, then when they do their psychic power in the psychic phase, you're like, boom, 3-up deny. Well, now they're fucked because they've moved out into the open and they can't charge. So there's lots of really, really powerful situations where being able to reliably deny certain powers can be absolutely game-changing. So this is definitely a detachment worth considering. Next, we move on to the TZEENTCH detachments. So I call this one Big Bird. It's 24 power level, 485 points, and once again, it's going to cost you 4 command points for this detachment because it's a patrol costing you 2, and we've also given a Warlord trait and relic to the Lord of Change. So HQ, we've got a Lord of Change. He has the Architect of Deception Exalted trait, which means he is -1 to be hit. And then he has Incorporeal Form for -1 to be wounded. He's got the upgraded Soul Eater's Stave, which means he heals wounds when he does psychic damage. And then his psychic powers are Infernal Flames, which gives +1 to wound. He's got Bolt of Change for mortal wounds, Witchfire, and Infernal Gateway for more mortal wounds on Witchfire. And then we have a unit of 10 pink horrors to round out the detachment. So this guy's just an absolute fucker to kill. He's got a 3-up demon save at range. He's -1 to be hit. He's -1 to be wounded. Very, very powerful. And then when he does those Witchfire attacks, every time he wounds enemy models, he's regenerating wounds himself. So even if your opponent does put in serious shooting into him and gets him down, he's just going to regenerate himself back up. So he's very, very powerful. One thing worth noting though is you need to make sure that you are protecting him from any sort of melee. I actually just did a live battle report with the lads from Risky Rollers where I was able to charge my Bloodthirster into their Lord of Change, and I pretty much just one-shot him, killed him. So no matter how many negs to hit, negs to wound, you know, invulnerable saves and shit, if he's in combat, he's going to die. So if you're running a list where you've got the units to protect him, he can sit there and do massive amounts of mortal wound damage whilst being a really hard unit to put down himself. So very powerful. Next detachment is called TZEENTCH's Firestorm. It's 24 power level. It's going to cost you 525 points and 3 command points. So for this one, we have a Fate Skimmer with the Retinue of Horrors, which gives him +1 to his casts. He has the Staff of Change. He has Infernal Flames for +1 to wound, and he has Infernal Gateway for mortal wounds Witchfire. Then in the elites, we have 2 units of 6 Flamers, which are maxed out squads, and we have 1 unit of 3 Flamers, which is a mid squad to reduce the power level. So the idea of this is that the demons come down and they just do massive amounts of flamer damage. That Fate Skimmer gives them +1 strength and can give one of the units +1 to their wound rolls, and then you can put out an absolute shit ton of damage. You can either drop both of them in at once and just go nuts, or you can drop the character and 1 unit of flamers, and then next turn drop another unit of flamers to support. There's a few different ways that you can do it, or you can drop 2 units of flamers on the flanks. There's a lot of versatility in this detachment. All right, now we move on to the NURGLE stuff. We have Immovable Object. It's 24 power level, it's 480 points, and it's 4 command points. So again, like the other ones where we've got the greater demons, we're spending more command points to give them the warlord traits and their relics. He has so we have a great unclean one. He is revoltingly resilient for -1 damage. He has the Plague Fly Hive, which is a 6-inch aura of -1 to be hit and can't perform actions. He has Corruption, which is a +1 damage, ignore, feel no pain, and phase cap weapon. He has the Bile Sword, a Bile Blade, which allows him to take 1 mortal wound in order to get +1 to his casts. And then his psychic powers are Shriveling Pox for -1 toughness, and Malodorous Pole, which is can't do action and lose obsec. And then we have 10 Plague Bearers to round that out. Alright, so the idea with this guy is not only is he a super tough, toughness 9, -1 damage monster that's really, really hard to kill, he is also able to contribute to the rest of your army in some really interesting ways. He's able to put -1 toughness on a target, and then you can hit it with your other units. So that takes things like Warp Talons who are only strength 4. You know, you can go, cool, well that thing that's toughness 4, well I'm going to put -1 toughness on it to make it toughness 3, then I'm going to charge in my Warp Talons, and now I'm winning on 3s with rerolls. Or it allows you to combine that with Veterans of the Long War to play with those breakpoints really interesting ways and make it so that you're winning a lot of different things on a 2+ with a lot of your army. So that's a really powerful synergy in itself. And then he also has the ability to prevent enemy units from performing actions, prevent them from having objectives secured, and he has a 6-inch aura of -1 to hit. Now the reason that this is interesting is because what you can do is you can put him down and then you can ring, say, your Terminators around him, and then you can put the Black Rune of Damnation on the Terminators, so they're now -1 to be wounded, and if your opponent tries to hurt them in combat, they're going to have to get within 6 inches of the Great Unclean One in order to be engaged with you in combat, which means they're going to be -1 to hit as well. So walking around being -1 to hit and -1 to be wounded on a big unit of Terminators, that's really powerful. Next detachment is called Get Sloppity. So it's got 23 power level, 445 point commitment, and 3 command points. So we have the Sloppity Bile Piper, and he has the Disease of Mirth ability, which is, again, like the Great Unclean One, he has the ability to turn off obsec and prevent your opponent from doing actions. He also gives +1 to move, advance, and charge. Then we have the Poxbringer, who has Malodorous Pole, which is, again, can't do actions, can't do obsec, and he has the Plague Fly High for the -1 to hit and can't do actions. And then in the troops, we have 10 Plague Bearers, 3 Nurglings, and another 3 Nurglings. So there's a few different things in this detachment that provide massive utility for a Chaos Space Marines player. First, you've got the Sloppity Bile Piper and the Plague Bearer, Plague Caster, or whatever the fuck it's called. And basically, they're going to be contributing psychic damage, and they're going to be stopping your opponent from being obsec and stopping your opponent from being able to do actions. Stopping your opponent from being obsec is really, really powerful because basically you can put this guy on an objective, surround him with your units, and if your opponent tries to take that objective off you with objective secured models, so say you've got Chosen or Possessed holding an objective who are not objective secured, if they go, oh cool, I'm just going to walk 1 guardsman on there and take that objective from you, this guy can be like, nope, turn off your obsec, and now you hold the objective once again. So that's a really powerful ability that Chaos Space Marines really like because our objective secured options are quite limited, whereas our powerful units like the Terminators, the Chosen, the Possessed, are really, really good. Their only real weakness is that they don't have objective secured. So being able to tell your opponent that neither do they, very, very powerful. And then also, those 2 units of Nurglings provide something that the CSM Codex doesn't have, and that's the ability to forward deploy. And this is really powerful for a few different legions, things like Night Lords, for example, who have a strong turn 1 deep strike. If your opponent has forward deploy units, they can actually screen you out and force you to deep strike somewhere that's suboptimal. Whereas if you have these Nurglings, you can use them to create space where you pre-game deploy, and now your opponent can't deploy near those Nurglings, which means they can't stop you from then turn 1 dropping in that spot. Same goes for Alpha Legion. They have pre-game moves, which allow them to basically move up the board and then start of the turn, move again, which is really, really powerful. However, if your opponent has the ability to put those units out in front of you, they can screen you out and stop you from achieving that. Nurglings go a long way to stop that. All right, next we have a SLAANESH detachment called Thirsty Bitch. So it's 21 power level, 420 points, and it costs 2 command points. You have a Keeper of Secrets with Insatiable Onslaught, which gives her +2 to advance and charge rolls. You also have Phantasmagoria, or Phantasmagoria, whatever the fuck it's called. It deals mortal wounds and reduces leadership. You have Cacophonic Choir, which deals mortal wounds based on leadership. And you have a Shining Aegis for a 4-up, 4-up. And then to round the detachment out, we have 10 Demonettes. Now this is one of my favorites because I think this synergizes really well with a few different things. First of all, Mark of SLAANESH and SLAANESH themed CSM armies are very popular and very powerful. And that means you're likely to have a Mark of SLAANESH Master of Possessions who has Warp Locus. Now, because this Keeper of Secrets gets +2 to their charges and is Mark of SLAANESH, if you deep strike it in within 6 inches of your Master of Possessions and 6 inches away from your enemy, you're actually looking for a 4 on the dice in order to make that charge from deep strike, which is insane. That's so powerful. So being able to just really, really reliably get that charge is so good, especially on a giant monster that's going to smash things when it gets in to do those fights. So that's really powerful. And then also it has some funny things that it can do with leadership, you know, so it can reduce your leadership and then it can do another power where it does mortal wounds based on your leadership. And then if you pair this with something like Night Lords, who are able to move up units to reduce your leadership even further, and then you're able to use your demon units to reduce leadership even further, you can get your opponent down to some dangerously low leadership values and then do some serious damage with those psychic powers. So this is a really sick combo, and I would like to see this wielded with Night Lords. I think there's some really powerful combos to be had there. And then also the Demonettes are just such a good unit. They're really fast, so they're a good answer to like going out and raising banners early in the game. They're also really good in that they can hide behind a ruin or something like that and just launch out attacks, and they can travel massive distances when they do, and they're bringing objectives secured with them. So being able to just launch out and take objectives off your opponent is really, really powerful. So I really, really like this detachment. All right, the next one is called Seek and Destroy. So it's 25 power level. It's 455 points, and it kind of costs you 3 command points to have this detachment. It has a Torment Bringer on Seeker Chariot, who has the Symphony of Pain psychic power for -1 to hit and -1 to wound in melee. Then in the fast attack, we have 3 Hell Flayers and 2 Seeker Chariots. All right, so this one is just bringing a shit ton of those chariots. And these chariots, I think, are one of the most underrated and overlooked units in the new Demons book, because they're really cheap, they're really fast, and they're actually surprisingly tough for their value. So those of you who have seen my Rhino masterclass and have heard me talk about rhinos will know that I love rhinos because I think for that 85 points, they're just a really tough, annoying unit. You know, they can move in, they can pile in, they can touch your opponent so your opponent can't fall back and charge. They can tag your opponent so your opponent can't shoot. They can just, you know, move, block things, and they can create these areas where your opponent can't go. The humble rhino is so powerful if it's wielded correctly. And I think these guys fill a very similar role, with the addition that they actually do pretty decent damage in combat for their points. So a lot of people just look at them and go, oh yeah, it's got a few attacks. It's not really that scary. It's not really that powerful. But you're overlooking the fact that they're so fucking cheap, right? So you can fit a ton of them in your list, and now all of a sudden you're able to push out and you're able to really just bully your opponent, and it's hard for your opponent to deal with them. They're just so good. I really like them. They're fast, they do damage, they can, you know, do all types of things. So I really like this detachment as well. All right, and last but not least, we have a bonus. So this is my 9th pick, and this is the Be'lakor Supreme Command. So this one's 21 power level, it's 421 points, and it will actually cost you 0 CP, because if you make him the Warlord and he's in a Supreme Command detachment, you then don't have to spend those 3 CP, or you effectively get them refunded. And then if you take Be'lakor, for psychic powers, I recommend taking Penumbral Curse, because that's -1 AP and -1 to wound on an enemy unit in melee, which is really powerful, and Pall of Despair, which is a fight's last, fail action, or turn off auras. So there's no question that making your opponent fight last is immensely powerful in the game, because you can combo things right where you charge one there, make them fight last, fight here first, and then they can't interrupt there, which means that they can't kill you back. That's really powerful. or as a defensive thing where when your opponent charges you with multiple things, you can go, cool, well, I'm going to make that one fight last, you fight here, then I interrupt before anything else fights, and that's really powerful as well. So making your opponent fight last is really good. Making your opponent fail actions is becoming increasingly good because there are more and more actions that will take you an entire turn to complete, whether they be a mission specific one or something specific on a unit's data sheet. Like maybe it's the dropping bombs of something, or maybe it's, you know, like the warp, what's it called? Fucking Storm Surge does his little plant his anchors action. Like being able to prevent your opponent from being able to do actions is really powerful. And also turning off auras is really, really powerful because there are certain auras in the game that are quite problematic to deal with. And if you're able to just go turn that off, sorry, you don't get all your rerolls anymore, and then charge in, really, really powerful. And then on top of that, Be'lakor is just an absolute monster. He's an absolute beat stick. He does massive amounts of damage. He ignores invulnerable saves. He just kills things so effectively. And he's really, really hard to kill. He has neg 1 to be hit. He's neg 1 to be wounded. He has neg 1 damage. He has a 4-up invulnerable save. He's toughness 7. Like, he's just a really hard to deal with target. You know, Bolt is wounding him in 6s. It's like, they're just not going to do the damage. So having him in your CSM list just gives you that one really big, hard-hitting unit that just goes in and smashes things in half. So this is my special 8th pick, or my 9th pick, for best demonic allied detachment. Alrighty guys, I hope you enjoyed that video. I know it was a little bit shorter than usual, but I just wanted to sort of take a moment to go through some of the different options that are available to Chaos Space Marine players when allying things in with their, you know, allying demons in with their CSM, you know, armies. So just wanted to take a moment to go through that. I also just want to say, like I said in the intro, please, if you want to support the channel, either head over to Patreon, sign up for a monthly, you know, contribution, or buy the neoprene objective markers, or use the new feature on YouTube to do a super thanks. So even if you felt like, oh, this video was worth $1, you know, chuck $1 my way. You know, I'm never going to put anything behind a paywall and make it so that you can't access the content for free. However, I do very much appreciate those people that do pay for the content and do support the channel, so I can continue to grow and I can continue to do things like take a day off so that I can record a video instead of getting up at 5 a.m. so that I can record the video before work. You know, things like that. What I want to try and do with the channel. I want to try and get to a point where I'm able to sit down and put more effort and more time into really perfecting the quality and content that I'm able to put out. And one of the best ways that you can help me do that is by supporting the channel financially, by doing those super thanks or signing up on Patreon. So huge thank you to all those who already support me on Patreon. And thank you in advance to those who hit that super chat, not super chat, super thanks. I think they call it super thanks. Either way, let's play with it. Let's see what we can do. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys in the next one. Thanks for tuning in. See you around.
Look for the Blood God.
The Warhammer community suffers from some of the most prohibitively expensive essentials in the world, especially Australian content creators. Every single day, Dean wants to create content, but he can't. Suffering from old, worn-out brushes, expensive model kits, and costly software and equipment, he can't endure much longer. Just look at this dirty paint water. Would you drink this? Would you let your child? Even a small monthly donation can help provide Dean with clean paint water, basic tools for survival, and access to life-saving information and education. So please, follow the links in the description below and find out how you can sponsor a mad cunt like Dean today and end the suffering. Suffering that is cruel, unsustainable, and your fault.
Do your objective markers ever get lost behind terrain or other models and become difficult to see? Do they ever get bumped and accidentally moved during a game? And do they ever spark arguments about distances? Well, not anymore. Introducing the blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers. Made from the same material as astronaut suits, or maybe military equipment, or probably neither of those things, this 2mm thick neoprene synthetic rubber is tear resistant, water resistant, and is designed to last. But that's not all. The blog for the Blood God, not even remotely patented neoprene objective markers come in a variety of different designs and styles to suit any faction represented in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. These objective markers are a perfect gift for yourself or a friend, and are a perfect way to flex and show your opponent that not only are you a smarter, cooler, and better 40k player than them, but you also have more disposable income than they do. For the low price of $25, you'll get not one, not two, but 6 neoprene objective markers, perfectly designed for 9th edition Warhammer 40k. But wait, there's more. For a limited time only, people who sign up on Patreon to support Blog for the Blood God as a Skull Champion tier $5 per month member will gain access to a custom design service where I will design a unique logo to support their gaming club, like the one I did to the left here for the Potato Farmers local gaming club here in Melbourne. Follow the links in the description of this video to pick up your set today.